Do you realize?
So when the church fathers quote the Gospels in 96 AD, that means the Gospels were written before 96 AD because they're quoted. It's that simple. It's not complex. Anybody can understand that.
What's up, guys? Glad you're here. So picture this. A college professor walks up to Cliffe Knechtle on campus and straight up declares there's zero historical evidence that Jesus ever existed. Not, let's discuss this. Not, I have some questions. He opens with full dismissal. Then he doubles down by claiming Constantine literally invented Christianity centuries later. What follows is honestly one of the most satisfying exchanges I've seen, because Cliffe doesn't get defensive or emotional. He just methodically dismantles every single claim with historical facts the professor clearly wasn't prepared for. Trust me when I say you're going to want to see how this plays out all the way through, especially when the professor tries the spaghetti monster argument and it backfires spectacularly. And hey, real quick, I'm genuinely curious where all of you are tuning in from today. Drop your city or country in the comments because I love seeing how global this community is getting. All right, let's jump into this.
There's actually no historical evidence of Jesus. You're going to say Josephus?
What year do you live in, sir? 2018. What on earth does that mean? 2018 years after the birth of Christ.
Yeah, we made that up. I get that.
No, we didn't make that up.
A guy named Constantine did.
Constantine did not make up the calendar, sir. You're wrong. Study your history.
See? Just ad hominem.
It's not ad hominem. Constantine
What ad hominem
did
is?
not put together the calendar.
That's true.
All right, then why'd you say Constantine made up?
Because he's the one that invented Christianity. That's how we get the Christian calendar idea.
All right, what's your evidence that Constantine created Christianity?
Western history?
There's absolutely no evidence that Constantine created Jesus Christ. See y'all Saturday.
Maybe you should talk to a seminarian.
I did go to seminary.
Did you listen?
Yeah, I tried to. Same way I'm trying to listen to you. It's not easy, but I'm trying.
It's not easy because I disagree with you.
No, it's not easy because you're making ridiculous claims. Constantine,
ridiculous
sir,
to say
did not
Constantine.
create Jesus Christ.
The way he talks over me.
Jesus lived in the first century. There are documents, thousands of them, about this historical Jesus of Nazareth. Constantine did not make up Jesus, sir. Please study your history.
Did I say he made up Jesus?
Yeah, you said he created him.
Oh, didn't I say he created the idea of Christianity, which is what he did?
All right, what does that mean, he created the idea of
Do
Christianity?
you know the history of Constantine and Constantinople?
Yeah?
What happened?
Constantine converted to Christ after a battle that he won. And he thought he saw a cross in the sky, and he put the cross on his soldier's shield.
Why did he do that?
Because the empire was about to divide, and he was about to lose his power. And he wanted to win a battle.
Divisions.
Pardon?
There were 5 divisions.
Yeah, so?
One of them is his brother, and he wanted to unify all of them.
Yeah,
So he
so?
pretended to go with a primitive sect called Christianity. And he defeated his brother and the 3 other people so he could be the sole leader of Rome. That's what made Christianity famous. Before that, no one believed any of it, except for the few people in the sects. So you
What
know
sects?
that. You sounds like you've read it.
What sects?
Of Christianity. It was a roaming group of sects that nobody believed in.
So all the first Christians were Jews, they weren't Romans. All the first Christians were not
both.
Romans.
They're both.
They were Jews. No, in the first century and the early second
question is not
century,
who they were.
the followers of Christ were predominantly Jews. Then it spread. The Apostle Paul started communicating the gospel of Christ to Gentiles. And then there was a real conflict between Jews and Gentiles who were following Christ. You can read about it in Acts chapter 15, the first council in Jerusalem.
I don't want to read your stuff. I'm talking about
It's not
the
my
history.
stuff. It's the Gospels and the book of Acts. It's not
Your
my
stuff.
stuff. And
That's your
Constantine didn't write any of it.
That's
Matthew,
true.
Mark, Luke, and John, Peter, James, and Paul wrote
Now,
it, sir.
You guys see how
not
everything
Constantine.
I've said, he's gone a different direction?
Yeah,
That's
because
what
you're-
you have to do.
You're speaking gibberish, sir.
See what I mean?
Posing
Ad
to be,
hominem.
you're posing to be a historian. You're saying that Constantine started Christianity. No, Constantine propelled Christianity
That's all I
by
said.
stopping
That's
the
all
persecution
I said.
of
Wait,
Christians.
into something else?
No, it's not. It's exactly what
This
you
is why
said.
when you sit in a classroom, you listen to me, and when you sit out here, you listen to him.
What do you teach?
He's promoting emotion, and I'm promoting logic.
No, that's
See?
ridiculous.
What?
Think,
Gibberish.
sir.
It's
think.
gibberish.
Think.
I've been thinking for longer than you've been alive.
Oh, really?
Believe it or not.
So you've been reincarnated?
No, I'm probably older than you.
You know, it's not voted.
So what do you think about Jesus Christ?
Top 3 issues.
I think he was a guy that the only real information we have is from a guy named Josephus. And recently we've discovered that he isn't very reliable. So what most seminarians know is it's the myth of Jesus, not the Jesus the man, that's important. That myth is something that came from the sects and then Constantine. But that wasn't even my point. Your point was that all people are created equal. And we don't know that. So you're promoting an idea that you believe that has no evidence.
I didn't say that.
Opening with the professor said this: "There's actually no historical evidence of Jesus," is such a bold claim that you immediately know this conversation is going to be interesting. Because what happens next shows exactly why making sweeping statements without backing them up can backfire. The professor pivots to claiming the professor said this. He's the one that invented Christianity, referring to Constantine, and Cliffe responds with a straightforward correction. Cliffe said this: "Constantine, sir, did not create Jesus Christ." Just like that. Because here's what's fascinating. This Constantine theory is one of those claims that circulates widely, but doesn't hold up when you actually examine the timeline and the documents. Constantine didn't convene the Council of Nicaea until 325 AD. By that point, you already have thousands of manuscript copies of the Gospels circulating across the Roman Empire, North Africa, and Asia Minor. You've got church fathers like Ignatius, Polycarp, and Clement quoting New Testament texts in the early 2nd century. The idea that Constantine somehow invented Jesus 3 centuries after the fact doesn't align with what we can verify historically. Notice what happens when the professor gets challenged. The claim shifts. First, it's Constantine invented Jesus, then it becomes Constantine invented Christianity. That's a completely different argument, and it shows the position isn't as solid as it initially sounded. Then the professor says the professor said this. He's promoting emotion, and I'm promoting logic. But watch the actual exchange. Cliffe is citing historical facts, documents, dates, manuscript evidence, while the professor is making broad claims without supporting details. The contrast is pretty clear when you pay attention to who's actually presenting verifiable information.
You said all people are created equal, therefore Jesus Christ.
You'd quote me better. What I said was, according to Jesus Christ and the Bible, all human beings are equal because we all have been created in the image of God. That's what I said.
I pretend to teach so I can talk the whole time.
Yeah, well, you love to run circles. You're not being intellectually honest, sir.
Ad hominem.
No, it's a fact. I'm just listening from you to you.
From me or to me?
Why don't you tell me what you think about Christ?
I don't have to think about it. I know what it is.
No, Christ
It's a
is not
myth system.
Christ is a person, a human being who lived in Israel, in Palestine, about 2,000 years ago. So what do you think about the historical Jesus?
I don't think we have evidence of the historical Jesus.
Okay, why?
Because from what I understand about history, that is the side that evidence is on.
Give me one piece of evidence that the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are mythology.
How would I give you evidence that it's mythology?
Well, very simple. By talking about literary genre, by talking about archaeology, by talking about manuscript evidence, by talking about internal consistency or inconsistency.
Right. So are you asking me whether I'm telling you it's not true? Yes, there were things written.
When?
But we're not arguing.
When were they written?
The things we read now were written more in the Dark
Mark,
Ages.
Luke, and John. When were they written?
Well, the fact is they were rewritten and rewritten and rewritten in the Dark Ages.
When were they first written?
I don't think we know that.
Well, of course we do.
That's the whole point.
The early church fathers quote the Gospels in 96 AD.
But you see,
So obviously the Gospels were written in the 1st century. Obviously.
obviously.
You can't quote a document if it's not been written yet. Obviously.
Do you realize?
So when the church fathers quote the Gospels in 96 AD, that means the Gospels are written before 96 AD because they're quoted. It's that simple. It's not complex. Anybody can understand that.
Hey, what's your educational background?
Well, I started at a very early age by going to kindergarten. What's your educational background?
But what it seems like is that it's in theater.
No, I never have done debate. I never have done studied theater.
I'm not saying debate. I'm saying theater.
I've never taken a theater class in my life.
Then why are you so good at it? Just
I don't know.
Talented? But what you're teaching these kids is theater.
No, I'm not teaching them theater. I'm teaching them about Jesus Christ, the historical Christ, who is not a myth, but is reliable.
You realize most seminarians don't believe in the historical Jesus Christ.
That's false.
They believe in the myth of Jesus Christ. They
No.
believe that has more to teach than a man that we
No.
don't have evidence for.
That's a very limited group of seminarians you're talking about. Like at Harvard Divinity School or at Yale Divinity School. Yes, there's some of that
Just
taught.
Yale.
At
Just
McCormick
Yale.
Divinity School, yes. But the vast majority of graduates of seminary today in the world, not just in good old US of A, but in the world, the Anglican Church in Africa, the churches in South America, they understand Jesus is Lord, Jesus is God. But why? Because the historical evidence is he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead. And that's an historical fact. That's not a mythology.
How are you telling people that it's fact, though?
Well, I already challenged you on tests
No, but
that you use to determine historicity, but you've evaded it. You've not answered it.
All right, do you realize that asking somebody to disprove something is not the same as proving it
That's not
yourself?
what I asked you. I asked you, how, you don't listen at all, sir.
me.
How do you positively decide whether an historical document is accurate or not? How do you make that
Okay,
decision?
well, let me ask you a question.
This is where something really significant happens. The professor makes a claim about the Gospels that raises immediate questions about the foundation of his argument. The professor said this: "The fact is, they were rewritten and rewritten and rewritten in the Dark Ages." And when Cliffe asks when they were first written, the professor responds with, "The professor said this: I don't think we know that." That answer is surprising, because when you're challenging the historical reliability of documents, knowing when they were originally written is crucial. That's not a minor detail. It's the starting point for any serious historical analysis. Cliffe responds with straightforward logic. Cliffe said this: "You can't quote a document if it's not been written yet." Obviously. The early church fathers are quoting Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in 96 AD. That means those documents existed before 96 AD. It's basic chronological reasoning that anyone can follow. Here's something worth understanding. We have extensive manuscript evidence for the New Testament. We're talking about over 5,000 Greek manuscripts, plus thousands more in Latin, Coptic, and Syriac translations. Compare that to other ancient documents, like Homer's Iliad, which survives in about 650 manuscripts, or Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars, which has roughly 10 reliable copies. Scholars don't question whether Caesar wrote his accounts, using the same skepticism applied to the Gospels. Then the professor makes another claim. The professor said this: "Most seminarians don't believe in the historical Jesus Christ." And Cliffe immediately points out this represents a very specific subset of Western academia. The global church across Africa, South America, and Asia operates from a completely different understanding based on the same historical evidence that's been examined for 2,000 years.
You don't want to answer?
Because it's impossible to answer.
Well, then why don't you ask me how I would do it?
Right. What I'm asking you is the same type of question. If I believe in an invisible spaghetti monster, how do you disprove me?
By asking you, what's the evidence that the invisible spaghetti monster is alive?
I've written tons of documents about it, and I can tell you why you can't see it and I can.
No, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not talking about an invisible person, Jesus of Nazareth.
And I'm talking about that situation. I'm talking about my own situation that's very similar. I have an invisible spaghetti monster, and there's plenty of documents. Go online, actually. You'll find
What are they?
millions of entries online about the spaghetti monster.
Why?
Unfortunately, you can't see them and I can. How do you disprove me?
By saying, before I'm going to trust anybody, I want evidence that they're real.
Right.
And if you're going to tell me about the spaghetti monster, and there's no evidence that the spaghetti monster lives, I'm not going to believe in the spaghetti monster. It's that simple.
That's what I just said to you.
So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historical
Me and a million other
narratives.
people online that documented the spaghetti monster. It's the same sort of document.
There's no reliable document about the spaghetti monster.
What's more reliable like yours than about the spaghetti monster?
The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were
Well,
written
you're calling them.
in the first century by eyewitnesses.
During different centuries.
Those eyewitnesses saw Christ, heard Christ.
Right, we saw the spaghetti monster. That's what I'm telling you. I understand you didn't see it, and that's fine. But we see it, and he's invisible to people like you, but visible to people like me.
Well, then if you want to go ahead and believe in the spaghetti monster because you've seen him,
Right.
that's your right. I respect your right to do that. But because there's no
Also not out
evidence
here trying to convince them about spaghetti monster technology. I can if you guys want to know. He's super interesting.
because there is no evidence that I've seen that the spaghetti monster is real.
Right, I get that.
But because the evidence is that Jesus Christ is real, that's why I have put my faith in Christ.
But you're not providing any reason for it.
Because you interrupt me, that's why. I was answering that.
The reason is that I interrupt you. That's the only, you've had all day out here to prove it.
Oh, I can't prove anything.
I know you
Question
can't
is
prove
evidence.
anything. That's what I'm saying.
What does the evidence point to?
So before you talk to these people, find things you can prove.
Prove to me we're having this conversation.
I can actually prove it.
Prove it. How? Go ahead, do it.
Because you can't use language without external reality.
Prove to me I'm not a bad dream you're having.
Right. It's because
possible.
we're using language.
You can't prove anything.
Are you?
You don't base your life on proof. You base your life on evidence. The evidence is we're having this conversation. That's why we continue.
Right here, you see something fascinating about how these conversations develop. Cliffe asked the professor a direct question. How do you determine whether a historical document is accurate? And the professor responds with, "The professor said this. It's impossible to answer." That's a remarkable admission because historians do have established methods for evaluating ancient documents. Textual criticism, archaeological corroboration, multiple attestation, enemy attestation, the criterion of embarrassment. These aren't exclusively Christian tools. These are standard scholarly approaches used to verify any ancient text, whether it's Tacitus, Josephus, or the Gospel of Luke. Then the professor introduces the spaghetti monster comparison. The professor said this, "Invisible spaghetti monster, how do you disprove me?" And here's where the analogy breaks down. The difference between a hypothetical invisible entity and Jesus is documentation. Nobody claims to have seen, spoken with, eaten with, and witnessed the death and claimed resurrection of the spaghetti monster. We have named individuals, Matthew, John, Peter, James, who wrote accounts and whose writings are referenced by external sources like Josephus, Tacitus, and Pliny the Younger. The spaghetti monster is an unfalsifiable thought experiment. Jesus of Nazareth is a documented historical figure. Even scholars who don't believe in his divine claims, like Bart Ehrman, don't dispute his historical existence. They debate his identity and teachings, but the existence itself is widely accepted in serious scholarship. And then Cliffe makes an important philosophical distinction. Cliffe said this, "You don't base your life on proof. You base your life on evidence." This is the key point many people miss. Proof is mathematical and absolute. Evidence is historical, legal, and experiential. We don't have mathematical proof that George Washington was the first president. We have overwhelming evidence, documents, eyewitness accounts, archaeological findings. The same standard of evidence applies to evaluating claims about Jesus. The professor arrived confident in his position, but encountered someone prepared with historical information and philosophical clarity. This exchange demonstrates what happens when broad skepticism meets detailed scholarship. The facts speak for themselves when both sides actually engage with them. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.